In the ICU waiting room, my stepmother whispered, "You don't deserve the Mercer name." Before her fist struck my cheek, the tang of blood mingled with antiseptic. My phone was on speaker, still connected to my father in recovery. They said he could barely hear. "Janelle," his hoarse voice rasped. "Are you there?" I wiped my lip, locking eyes with her. "Yes, Dad, I'm here, and I heard enough to end this little game of hers at the company. My name is Ava Mercer. For the past 12 hours, that name had felt like a borrowed coat, something that didn't quite fit in the suffocatingly sterile corridors of St. Ober's Hospital. Here, I wasn't the VP of Operations for Halcyon Freight and Supply, the company my father built from a single flatbed truck into the logistical titan of Graybridge. Here, I was just a daughter, breathing in the trinity of hospital scents, bleach, rubbing alcohol, and a faint, underlying note of human despair. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous, sickly tune, casting everything in a cold, blue-white glare that stripped the life from skin and soul. They flickered, buzzed, and made the polished linoleum floors reflect a distorted, exhausted version of me every time I paced the length of the ICU waiting area. The manila folder in my hands was sweating, or maybe it was just me. Its edges were soft from the number of times I'd gripped and re-gripped it. Inside was the shareholder proxy directive. 20% of HFS's voting shares, my father's shares, were in limbo while he lay on the other side of a set of intimidatingly solid double doors, a web of tubes and wires tethering him to the world of the living. The document was my father's will made manifest before the end, a simple transfer of temporary voting rights to me, his only child, and his hand-picked successor in everything but name. All it needed was his signature, or even just a witnessed verbal assent in a moment of lucidity. His heart had been surgically repaired. A triple bypass they called a success, but he was still floating in a fog of anesthesia and pain medication. The doctors were hopeful. I was terrified. The waiting room was an island of uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. A television mounted in the corner played a silent news cycle of disasters and political squabbles, a world away from the intimate, slow-motion catastrophe of the ICU. My world had shrunk to the rhythmic beep of monitors I could faintly hear through the walls and the soft, rubber-soled squeak of nurses' shoes. It was in this compressed, high-stakes universe that the elevator doors hissed open and Janelle Mercer arrived. She was a vision of calculated grief. At 45, my stepmother was a master of appearances. She wore a winter white wool coat that probably cost more than my first car, its pristine color a deliberate, defiant statement against the grim backdrop of the hospital. Large, black sunglasses hid her eyes, rendering her expressionless, a marble statue of a concerned wife. She didn't walk. She swept into the room, the sharp, confident click of her heels, a stark interruption of the hospital's hushed rhythm. She'd been a board member at HFS for the 5 years she'd been married to my father, a position she'd acquired through matrimony, not merit, and one she used to cultivate alliances and undermine my authority at every turn. She didn't greet me. She glided to a stop a few feet away, her head tilted slightly as if listening to a frequency only she could hear. The air grew colder, heavier. "Any change?" she asked, her voice a low, smooth melody that was utterly devoid of warmth. "He's stable," I replied, my own voice tight. "They're trying to wean him off the ventilator for short periods. See how he does." Janelle nodded slowly, a parody of thoughtful concern. Her gaze, hidden behind the dark lenses, slid down to the folder in my hands. A flicker of something, a predatory tightening of her painted lips, was the only sign of her true intent. "What's that? More work? Ava, you need to learn to let go. Your father needs rest, not business." "It's the proxy directive," I said, my grip tightening on the folder. "Dad wanted it ready for when he was lucid." "Of course he did," she murmured. She took a step closer, the scent of her expensive, cloying perfume cutting through the antiseptic smell of the hallway. We were alone now, the other waiting families having drifted off to the cafeteria or to their own private circles of worry. The corridor leading to the vending machines and a side exit was empty, a tunnel of flickering fluorescent light. "Let me see it." It wasn't a request. I held my ground. "It's a family matter, Janelle, between me and my father." Her laugh was a quiet, brittle sound. "Darling," she said, removing her sunglasses with a slow, deliberate motion. Her eyes were as I remembered, cold, calculating, and utterly without pity. "By marrying your father, I am family, and as a board member, this is very much my business." She took another step, invading my personal space. She was close enough that I could see the tiny stress lines around her eyes, the only proof that she was human. She reached out, her fingers tipped with blood-red nails, and before I could react, she snatched the folder from my hand. The paper ripped slightly at the corner with a sound that felt louder than a gunshot in the oppressive silence. "The voting shares," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss that was meant only for me, "will be mine." She clutched the folder to her chest like a prize. "Victor Hale agrees. The company needs stable leadership, not a sentimental girl playing businesswoman." My blood ran cold, then hot. "You have no right." "I have every right," she countered, her lips curling into a triumphant smirk. "You are an operational manager. I am on the board. When your father is declared incapacitated, even temporarily, the board decides, and we will decide in favor of stability." It was then that my phone buzzed in my pocket. I'd been trying to reach the lead nurse, and a moment before Janelle's dramatic entrance, she'd called back. I had answered, asking her to let me know the second my dad showed any sign of responsiveness. She'd told me to hold on, that she was in his room right now. I'd left the line open, the phone on speaker by habit, a practice born from years of needing my hands free on warehouse floors and loading docks. As Janelle spoke, a new voice entered our conversation, faint and staticky from the phone's speaker. It was the nurse. "Mr. Mercer? Can you hear me? Owen? Your daughter is on the phone." Janelle's eyes darted down to my pocket, where the sound was emanating from. Her smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. The timing was a coincidence, a miracle, a random act of the universe, and it sealed my fate for the next 30 seconds. Seeing her momentary confusion, I reached for the folder. "Give it back, Janelle." Her composure snapped. The mask of the grieving wife dissolved, replaced by a rictus of pure fury. The empty corridor, the humming lights, the knowledge that my father was just on the other end of an open phone line, fragile and helpless. It all converged into a single, violent impulse. "You don't deserve the Mercer name," she spat, her voice dropping to a raw, guttural whisper. And then her fist struck my cheek. It wasn't a slap, it was a punch, a hard, deliberate blow from a heavy-ringed hand that landed high on my cheekbone. My head snapped to the side with a sickening crack that seemed to echo in the hallway. White light exploded behind my eyes, a silent firework of pain. My legs gave out and I stumbled backward, the back of my head connecting with the glass front of a large vending machine. The machine shuddered, its contents rattling violently. The world tilted, a nauseating blur of white walls and flickering lights. A high-pitched ringing screamed in my left ear, drowning out the hospital's hum. The metallic, salty taste of blood instantly filled my mouth. It mingled with the ever-present scent of antiseptic, creating a uniquely horrifying cocktail. Through the ringing, through the dizzying pain, I heard it. A sound so faint it was almost imaginary. A ghost on the line. "Janelle?" It was my father's voice. Hoarse, cracked, shredded by the breathing tube he'd had down his throat for days. But it was him. "Ava, Con, are you there?" The words were disjointed, barely audible, but they were a lighthouse in a storm of pain and shock. He heard. He might not have understood, but he had heard something. He had heard his wife's name in a tone that was anything but loving. The nurse had put the phone right next to his ear. I pushed myself off the vending machine, my body screaming in protest. My cheek was on fire, my head throbbing in rhythm with the frantic beeping of a nearby monitor. I tasted blood again. wiped my lip with the back of my hand, and saw the smear of red. I looked at Janelle. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a flicker of genuine panic. She had heard his voice, too. She had crossed a line and she knew it. "Yes, Dad," I said, my voice shaking but clear enough, projecting toward the phone in my pocket. "I'm here." I locked my gaze onto my stepmother's, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw her fear. I let a slow, cold smile spread across my bruised lips, and I heard enough to end this little game of hers at the company. Just then, 2 hospital security guards rounded the corner, their strides purposeful, their eyes scanning the hallway. One of them pointed a handheld device at the vending machine. "We got a vibration alert from this unit. Everything all right here, ladies?" Janelle's transformation was instantaneous. The panic vanished, replaced by a mask of deep, compassionate concern. She rushed to my side, her hand hovering near my arm as if to comfort me. "Oh, my dear, are you all right?" She felt faint. "Officer, just stumbled. It's all been so stressful." She turned her face to me, her expression a perfect portrait of worry for the benefit of the guards. But her eyes told a different story. They were glacial, filled with venom, and as she leaned in, her voice dropped to a whisper that was colder than the grave, a whisper meant only for the 2 of us in the echoing corridor. "No one will believe you. No one will believe you." That's what she whispered. The words hung in the antiseptic air long after the security guards had accepted her story of my dizzy spell and retreated down the hall. In that moment, Janelle believed she was untouchable, protected by a fortress of money, influence, and my father's last name, a name she'd only worn for 5 years. But she was wrong. She didn't understand the game board. She saw a grieving, emotional daughter. She failed to see the vice president of operations who knew exactly where every single corporate pressure point was located. To understand the sheer audacity of her punch, you have to understand Halcyon Freight and Supply. HFS isn't just a company, it's the circulatory system of Greybridge. We are the silent, 24-hour hum beneath the city's skin. Our refrigerated warehouses keep the city's grocery stores stocked. Our inland port moves millions of tons of goods that feed the manufacturing sector, and our private rail lines are the steel arteries connecting our region to the rest of the country. My father, Owen Mercer, built this empire from nothing. He started with 1 truck and a belief that logistics was less about moving boxes and more about keeping promises. He was the heart of HFS, and now, post-triple bypass, that heart was beating to the rhythm of a machine in the ICU, leaving a power vacuum so vast it had its own gravitational pull. That pull centered on his 20% block of voting shares. In the corporate ecosystem of HFS, that 20% wasn't just a stake, it was the kingmaker. It was the deciding factor in any contentious vote, the ultimate veto, the final word. And with my father medically incapacitated, those shares were, for all intents and purposes, in play. Enter Janelle. She met my father at a charity gala 5 years ago, a whirlwind romance that felt more like a corporate takeover. She was beautiful, sharp, and exuded a kind of ruthless charm that my father, still mourning my mother's passing years earlier, mistook for strength. Within 6 months, they were married. Within a year, she had leveraged her position as Mrs. Mercer to secure a seat on the board of directors. It was a move of breathtaking speed. She didn't know a bill of lading from a balance sheet, but she knew people. Specifically, she knew Victor Hale, the acting chairman of the board. Hale was a creature of the old guard, a man who saw HFS as a mature asset to be leveraged, not a legacy to be nurtured. Janelle and Victor became fast friends, a political alliance forged over expensive dinners and a shared contempt for my father's sentimental way of doing business. They saw tradition as a weakness and loyalty as a liability. While Janelle was mastering the art of the boardroom whisper campaign, I was learning the business from the ground up. My father made sure of it. I didn't start in a corner office. I started as a route manager on the graveyard shift, learning the rhythms of the loading docks, the smell of diesel fuel, and the names of the drivers who were the company's true lifeblood. I worked my way up through dispatch, warehouse logistics, And finally, to VP of Operations, my baby, my contribution to the Mercer legacy was the Skyline Network. It was our proprietary overnight delivery system for high-value, time-sensitive cargo, a complex ballet of trucks, trains, and dedicated staff that I built and managed personally. It was the most profitable and efficient division in the company, and it gave me something Janelle would never have: the genuine respect of the people who actually made HFS run. I controlled the arteries. Janelle just wanted to bleed them dry. The fight for control wasn't supposed to happen like this. The HFS corporate bylaws, a document I knew as well as my own name, had a specific clause for this exact scenario. Article 4, Section 3B. It stipulated that in the event of the temporary incapacitation of a major shareholder, a temporary proxy for their voting rights could be assigned based on a signal of intent. It was a forward-thinking rule my father himself had championed. It didn't require a signature on a notarized form if the shareholder was unable to provide one. It required a witnessed, authenticated expression of their will, a verbal confirmation to a doctor, a clearly stated wish overheard by a nurse, a recorded statement. It had to be provable, but it was a lifeline designed to prevent exactly the kind of predatory boardroom coup Janelle and Victor were planning. And I had the proof of that intent right up until she ripped it from my hands. The folder contained the draft of the new proxy assignment. My father and I had discussed it 2 days before his surgery. He was going to formally assign his temporary voting rights to me. It just needed his final assent. The document itself was now in her possession, but the intent, the conversation, the planning, was the real weapon. His weak, staticky voice over the phone was the first shot fired in its defense. The situation was more venomous than a simple power grab. For months, something had felt wrong in the company's financials. Maya Knoll, our CFO, was a woman who spoke in spreadsheets and bottom lines, not gossip. She was meticulous, fiercely loyal to my father, and deeply suspicious of Janelle and Victor Hale. A few weeks ago, over coffee in a cafe far from the office, she'd slid a tablet across the table to me, her finger resting on a series of line items. "There are some gray flows I can't account for," she'd said, her voice low. "Maintenance contracts for the Golden Spur port. The numbers are inflated, and the payments are cyclical. It feels structured." Gray money was Maya's term for legal but unethical financial maneuvering, the kind of thing that lived in loopholes and shell corporations. It was the precursor to outright fraud. The Golden Spur contracts were the key. She was sure of it. But she couldn't get access to the subcontractor details. Victor Hale had personally overseen that portfolio and sealed the records under a proprietary vendor clause. Then, last week, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Janelle and Victor had called an emergency board meeting for the coming Monday. The agenda was a single, explosive item, a proposed merger with a competitor, Fleet North Logistics. On the surface, it looked like a standard acquisition, but I knew Fleet North. They were vultures, a private equity-backed chop shop known for buying distressed logistics companies, selling off their assets piece by piece, and dissolving what was left. They weren't interested in HFS's legacy. They were interested in our real estate, our rail lines, our client lists. The merger was Janelle's endgame. It was a backdoor way to liquidate HFS's most valuable assets, funneling the money through the opaque channels created by those gray Golden Spur contracts, and walking away with a fortune, leaving the company a hollowed-out shell. My father would never approve it, but with him incapacitated and his 20% voting bloc neutralized, Janelle and Victor, along with 2 other board members they had swayed, would have the majority they needed. All they required was for my father's power to remain in limbo. The punch to my face wasn't just an act of personal hatred, it was a strategic move. It was meant to intimidate me, to sideline me, to make me seem unstable and emotional right before the most important vote in the company's history. She thought she could knock me out of the game, but all she did was show me exactly how high the stakes were. The security guards were procedural, their expressions carefully neutral. Janelle's performance was flawless. She was the picture of a frantic, concerned stepmother, explaining my sudden dizziness and fall with a convincing tremor in her voice. I said nothing, allowing her to weave her own narrative. I simply held the back of my head where it had impacted the vending machine, the throbbing in my cheek, a furious, rhythmic drumbeat. My silence was not weakness, it was observation. Just as the guards were about to accept the story and move on, a new figure appeared. It was Sarah, the lead ICU nurse, the one who had been on the phone. She emerged from the double doors, her face etched with professional concern. Her eyes took in the scene in a single, sweeping glance. Janelle's agitated posture, my hand on my head, the distinct and rapidly darkening bruise on my cheekbone, and the vending machine, which was now tilted at a slight but noticeable angle against the wall. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her voice calm but authoritative. Her gaze lingered on my face. "Ava, you're injured." "She fainted," Janelle insisted, a little too quickly. "The stress," she stumbled. Sarah walked over to me, her eyes doing a quick, clinical assessment. "A fall like that doesn't typically leave a localized contusion with that kind of definition," she said, her tone level, stating a fact, not an accusation. She looked at the guards. "An incident report will need to be filed. Hospital policy." She had handed me the first piece of my arsenal, an official, time-stamped document. A medical professional had witnessed the immediate aftermath. The bruise, the tilted machine. It was all going into a formal record. Janelle's smile tightened at the edges, a crack in her fortress. As the guards took my statement, a carefully edited version where I confirmed I had lost my balance, I was already mapping the digital breadcrumbs. Janelle was an amateur. She believed in what could be seen and heard in the moment. I believed in data. I knew this particular corridor was a notorious blind spot for the hospital's CCTV system, a fact she had likely counted on. But she didn't know about the vending machine. It was a new model, a smart unit, and like most smart devices, it was equipped with sensors, including an accelerometer to detect tilt or violent shaking, a feature designed to alert staff to vandalism. That sensor had a clock, synced to the hospital's network. It had registered a precise timestamp for the impact, a timestamp that would correlate perfectly with Janelle's presence in this corridor. The second, and most critical, piece of evidence was still in my pocket. My phone had continued to record the entire event. I use an application called MinutesMe for all my work calls. It's a corporate standard at HFS, an AI-powered tool that transcribes meetings and generates summaries, as per our company's IT policy, and to comply with consent laws. The app plays a brief, automated notification at the start of every call. This call is being recorded for quality and transcription purposes. The nurse had heard it. I had heard it. The call to the ICU was, technically, company business. I was acting in my capacity as a corporate officer securing shareholder instructions. The recording was legal, admissible, and devastating. While a junior security guard took Janelle's self-serving statement, I excused myself to the restroom. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, cold and pure. I locked the stall door, leaned against it, and took a deep breath. The reflection in the small steel mirror was a stranger, a woman with a swollen, discolored cheek and eyes that burned with a frighteningly calm fire. I pulled out my phone. The minutes. Me file from the last call was already processed. I renamed it Incident ICU Corridor 1834 OCT12.MP4A. I opened my email. The first was to Maya Knoll, our CFO. The subject line was clinical. Urgent. For timestamping. The body was brief. Maya, do not listen to this file. Just save it to the secure server and reply with confirmation. This is a time-sensitive legal matter. The second email was to Rowan Vale. He had been the Mercer family's lawyer for 40 years, a man whose quiet demeanor concealed a mind like a steel trap. The subject was the same. The body was more detailed. Rowan, listen to this immediately. Call me on my private line in 10 minutes. We have a situation. I attached the audio file to both emails and hit send. The digital ink was now dry. Two of the most powerful people in my professional circle now possessed a time-stamped recording of Janelle Mercer assaulting me and my father's voice echoing in the background. It was no longer my word against hers. It was her voice, her actions, preserved in digital amber. I requested the formal incident report number from the guards and asked the head of security to preserve all entry and exit logs for Janelle Mercer for the past 24 hours. The request, coming from someone with my surname and in this situation, was granted without question. I was building a container of objective fact around her emotional, impulsive violence. 10 minutes later, as I was applying a makeshift ice pack, a rubber glove filled with ice from a nurse's station, to my cheek, my personal cell phone vibrated. It was Rowan. "Ava," he said, his voice grim. There was no preamble. "I've listened to it 3 times. Are you safe?" "I'm fine," I said, my voice low. "The question is, what is our legal position?" I could hear the rustle of papers on his end. He was already in his office, already working. "Her position is catastrophic. Yours is formidable. I'm looking at the HFS bylaws right now. Article 7, Section 5. Any action of coercion, intimidation, or physical violence perpetrated by a board member against a key shareholder or their designated heir in matters pertaining to the transfer or exercise of shareholding rights shall be deemed a gross violation of fiduciary duty and an immediate and severe conflict of interest." I let the words sink in. Rowan had just handed me the cannon. "So this isn't just assault, it's a corporate crime." "It's a poison pill for her entire career on this board," Rowan confirmed. "We can petition for her immediate suspension pending an ethics investigation. The audio file is our primary evidence. The hospital report and witness testimony from the nurse will corroborate your physical state. It's a clean kill. Ava." A clean kill. The phrase was brutal, but accurate. I could end her right now. I could call the other board members, send them the file, and watch the fallout. But that would be a firestorm. It would be messy, public, and it would only remove Janelle. It wouldn't stop Victor Hale. It wouldn't stop the Fleet North merger. It would be winning a battle but losing the war. Janelle thought the game was about a physical confrontation in a hallway. The real game was for the soul of the company, and it would be played in the boardroom on Monday morning. As I was formulating this thought, my phone buzzed with an incoming text message. It was from a blocked, unknown number. My heart hammered against my ribs. The message contained only 8 words. "Check Doc 6 contract, designation J6. Doc 6. The Golden Spur Port, Maya's Gray Money. And now, a specific designation, J6. It was a key, handed to me by a ghost in the machine. Someone on the inside was fighting back. Someone knew where the real bodies were buried. This changed everything. My plan began to crystallize, shifting from a simple act of revenge to a multi-pronged corporate decapitation. A direct, immediate attack was what Janelle would expect. It was what a sentimental girl playing businesswoman would do. She would expect tears, accusations, a call to our father. I would give her none of it. I would give her silence. I would go home. I would nurse my bruise. I would spend the weekend coordinating with Maya and Rowan, digging into contract J6, and preparing for the Monday meeting. I would let Janelle walk into that glass-walled boardroom on Monday morning brimming with confidence. I would let her believe she had won, that her secret was safe, that I was a broken, intimidated girl who had been put in her place. I would let her and Victor Hale lay out their entire plan to dismember my father's company, right there in front of everyone. She wanted to play the game, fine, but we wouldn't be playing by her rules. We'd be playing by mine. And in my game, you don't see the checkmate until the king is already tipped over. Monday morning arrived with the cold, gray light typical of a Graybridge autumn. I spent a meticulous 30 minutes with concealer and foundation, transforming the ugly purplish bruise on my cheek into a dull, barely noticeable shadow. It was a war mask, a reminder. I chose a charcoal gray suit, severe and professional, armor. The HFS headquarters was a monument of steel and glass, and its heart was the North Dock boardroom on the top floor. It was a fishbowl, a glass box suspended 12 stories above the sprawling container yard. From here, you could watch the ceaseless, intricate dance of our operations, the cranes lifting containers from ships, the trucks moving in disciplined lines, the trains being loaded for their cross-country journeys. It was a view of real work, of tangible results. It was everything the people gathering in this room were about to try and destroy. I was the first to arrive. I set up my laptop at my designated seat, the hum of the high-tech projector the only sound. The long, polished obsidian table reflected the gray sky like a dark mirror. The others filed in at precisely 9 o'clock a.m. Victor Hale, the acting chairman, entered first. He was a man built of soft handshakes and hard opinions, his expensive suit failing to hide a spreading paunch. He nodded curtly at me, his eyes flicking for a moment to the side of my face. He saw the shadow of the bruise, and a flicker of satisfaction crossed his face before being professionally erased. He thought it was a sign of my weakness. Janelle was next, a vision in navy blue silk. She looked rested, confident, a queen surveying her court. She offered me a smile dripping with saccharine pity. "Ava, dear," she said, her voice loud enough for the others to hear. "I'm so glad you felt well enough to come. We were all so worried after your episode at the hospital." The two independent board members, Marcus Thorne and Elena Rios, followed. Marcus was a retired banking executive, cautious and obsessed with procedure. Elena was a tech entrepreneur, younger, sharper, and harder to read. Finally, there was Mr. Davies, the company's general counsel, a man who seemed permanently attached to a leather-bound copy of the HFS corporate bylaws. Victor tapped his pen on the table, calling the meeting to order. "Right," he began, foregoing any pleasantries. "A short agenda today, but a critical one. We're here to vote on the Fleet North merger, discuss the associated asset realignment at Golden Spur, and finally, to formalize the proxy for Owen's voting shares in his absence." He looked directly at me. "Given the circumstances, we need to ensure stability above all else." Janelle chose that moment to launch her first attack, cloaking it in the guise of compassion. "On that note, Victor," she said, her voice soft and maternal, "I'd like to propose a motion. Owen would want, above all else, for his daughter to be taken care of during this stressful time. The pressure she's under is immense. We saw that Friday. I think it would be in everyone's best interest, especially Ava's, if the board granted her a mandatory leave of absence, effective immediately, to rest and recover." It was a brilliant, vicious move. She was using the assault she committed to paint me as unstable and have me physically removed from the company. Marcus Thorne frowned, looking between us. Elena's expression remained impassive. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't defend myself. I simply clicked a button on my laptop, and the large screen at the end of the room lit up. "Before we discuss personnel matters," I said, my voice steady and cold, "I believe it's imperative the board understands the operational ramifications of the proposed merger." On the screen, a series of charts and data streams appeared. "This is the performance data for the Skyline division over the last 4 quarters, I began, my tone shifting to that of the VP of Operations. "As you can see, our efficiency is up 9%, and our profit margin is at an all-time high of 17%. The Fleet North proposal, which involves absorbing their inefficient and outdated vehicle fleet, will immediately increase our operational expenditures by an estimated 14%. Their safety record is subpar, which will jeopardize our contracts." I clicked to the next slide, which displayed the USDA logo and a block of legal text. Specifically, it will jeopardize our primary contract for transporting sensitive agricultural products. The USDA requires a 99.8% on-time delivery record and a sub-0.5% incident rate. Fleet North's rate is 3.4%. If we merge, we lose that contract. That's a net loss of $42 million in the first year alone. The merger isn't for stability. Victor, it's financial suicide. The room was silent. Marcus was scribbling notes furiously. Elena was leaning forward, her eyes fixed on the numbers. I had shifted the conversation from my emotional state to their fiduciary duty. Victor Hale waved a dismissive hand. Projections. Ava, just projections. We can renegotiate contracts. What the market needs right now is a strong signal of decisive leadership. We need to move forward. The synergies will offset these initial costs. He was speaking in corporate platitudes, the last refuge of a man with no data. We're calling the question. Let's move to the vote. First, the matter of Owen's shares. He looked at Davies. Counsel, what is the official status? Davies cleared his throat. As of this morning, Mr. Mercer remains medically incapacitated. No formal proxy has been signed or executed. Therefore, his shares cannot be voted. Janelle smiled. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Then it's a simple majority of the voting members present. Victor and I vote in favor of the merger. Marcus, Elena? This was it, the ambush. Not so fast, I said, my voice cutting through the room. I clicked my laptop again. The performance charts vanished, replaced by a scanned document, the shareholder proxy directive. My father and I prepared this document before his surgery. It assigns his temporary voting rights to me. Victor scoffed. A draft. Ava. It's unsigned. It means nothing. It's not just a draft, I countered. It's a signal of intent. The e-signature block is marked pending authorization, dated last Thursday. I brought up a second document alongside it. It was a sworn, notarized affidavit from Sarah, the ICU lead nurse. And this is a statement from my father's primary care nurse, testifying that on Friday evening, post-surgery, my father was lucid enough to identify me by name and ask for me twice. I turned to the general counsel. Mr. Davies, Article 4, Section 3B of our own bylaws. A temporary proxy can be assigned based on a clear intent signal if direct signature is not possible. What we have here is a prepared legal document indicating intent, followed by a witnessed, medically verified moment of lucidity where he specifically asked for the intended recipient of that proxy. I argue this meets the criteria. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic click of Marcus Thorne's pen against the table. Mr. Davies adjusted his glasses, his eyes scanning the documents on the screen. He was a creature of pure regulation, and I had just presented him with a textbook procedural dilemma. The bylaw does allow for interpretation in such circumstances. Davies admitted slowly, reluctantly. If the evidence of intent is deemed credible by the board and is supported by a statement from the attending medical authority, he trailed off, looking at Victor. He wasn't taking my side, but he was refusing to take theirs. He had validated the argument. Janelle let out a small, condescending laugh. The sound was ugly in the sterile room. She leaned back in her chair, the picture of smug confidence. She looked at me, her eyes full of scorn for my pathetic, legalistic attempt to stop the inevitable. Oh, darling, intent isn't a signature, she said, her voice dripping with finality. A mumble in a drugged-up haze isn't a legal directive. The man is not capable of making a decision. I met her gaze across the dark, reflective table. The shadow on my cheek seemed to throb. I let her victorious smile hang in the air for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then, I leaned forward. Then let's hear from the man himself. My words dropped into the room with the weight of stones. Then let's hear from the man himself. Janelle's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, then amusement. She thought I was bluffing. Victor Hale leaned back, crossing his arms in a clear display of paternalistic indulgence. He was letting the hysterical daughter have her moment. I ignored them. My movements were slow, deliberate. Every eye in the room followed my hand as I picked up my personal smartphone from the table. The silence was absolute, thick and heavy. The only sound was the distant, muffled sigh of the city 12 floors below. I tapped the screen, my fingers steady despite the frantic thunder of my own heart against my ribs. I navigated to my contacts, found the direct line to the ICU nurses station that Sarah had given me, and pressed the call button. Then, I pressed the speaker icon. The sound of the phone ringing filled the North Dock boardroom. Each electronic burring was unnaturally loud, an alien noise in this temple of corporate procedure. It was a raw, unfiltered intrusion of reality. Burring. Victor's look of amusement began to curdle into annoyance. Burring. Janelle shifted in her seat, her perfectly manicured hand tapping a nervous rhythm on the obsidian table. Burring. Marcus Thorne and Elena Rios exchanged a glance. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, simply watched, his face an unreadable mask. On the fourth ring, a voice answered, crisp and professional. ICU, Nurse Sarah speaking. The sound of her voice, so out of place, made everyone in the room sit up a little straighter. Sarah, it's Ava Mercer, I said, my voice as level as the horizon outside the window. I have you on speakerphone. You are in the presence of the HFS Board of Directors and our General Counsel. I paused, letting the legal weight of that statement settle. I need you to do something for me. I need you to place this phone next to my father's ear. There was a moment of professional hesitation. Ava, I'm not sure about the protocol for… Sarah, I interrupted, my voice firm but calm. It is a matter of urgent corporate and family importance. Please, just do as I ask. I could hear the soft squeak of her shoes, the rustle of sheets, the faint, rhythmic beep of a monitor in the background. That beep was the metronome of the moment, a steady, electronic heartbeat broadcast from a hospital room miles away into our glass cage. Beep, beep, beep. Okay, Ava, Sarah's voice came back, closer now, more intimate. The phone is by his ear. He seems responsive today. His eyes are open. I took a breath. This was the fulcrum on which everything would turn. I looked across the table, past the skeptical faces, and met Janelle's cold, confident gaze. Owen, I said, using his first name, making it formal for the record. This is Ava. The board is here. I have a question for you, and I need you to answer as clearly as you can. I paused, letting the words sink in. Dad, do you want to grant me temporary proxy to vote your shares? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It stretched, thinning the air in the room until I felt I couldn't breathe. The only sound was that single, lonely beep from the heart monitor, transmitted across the city. Beep, beep, beep. Each one was a lifetime. Victor Hale began to shift, a dismissive smirk returning to his face. Janelle's lips curled into a triumphant smile. It was over. The old man was too weak, too sedated. My grand gesture had failed. And then, a voice came through the speaker. It was a ghost's voice, a dry, ragged whisper, stretched and distorted by pain and medication, but it was unmistakably the voice of Owen Mercer, and he did not say yes. He said, Janelle, hit my daughter. The words were not loud, but they landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. Time stopped. Victor Hale, who had been leaning back in his chair, froze mid-motion. Marcus Thorne's pen clattered from his fingers onto the table, the sound like a crack of thunder. Elena Rios's eyes widened, and she shot a look at Janelle that was pure ice. Mr. Davies's head snapped up, his professional neutrality shattered. And Janelle, all the color drained from her face, the blood left her skin, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask of absolute horror. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She was staring at my phone as if it were a venomous snake. My father wasn't done. After a pause, his voice returned, a little stronger this time, imbued with a thread of steel I hadn't heard in weeks. I want Ava to have temporary voting rights. Each word was slow, deliberate, heavy with intent. Put it in the minutes. The spell was broken. The room exploded into a controlled chaos of rustling papers and sharp, indrawn breaths. This is outrageous, Victor Hale boomed. Finding his voice first, he was on his feet, his face flushed with anger. He's clearly disoriented. He's hallucinating. Mr. Davies, the general counsel, held up a hand, his mind already working through the legal implications. A serious allegation has been made and a direct instruction has been given, he said, his voice cutting through Victor's blustering. Ms. Mercer, he said, looking at me. For the record to be clear, I need the metadata from this call, the log, the time, the duration, and a copy of the hospital incident report you alluded to earlier. Of course, I said calmly. I picked up my company iPad, which had been sitting silently beside my laptop. With a few taps, I composed an email to Davies, attaching the call log screenshot, the PDF of the official St. Ober's incident report, and Sarah's notarized affidavit. I hit send. A moment later, a notification pinged on Davies's own tablet. He looked down, his eyes scanning the documents. I had delivered the evidence before he had even finished asking for it. He's not lucid, Janelle finally shrieked. Finding her voice, she stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. He's on a cocktail of drugs, fentanyl, propofol. You can't possibly take the word of a man in that state. This is a farce. I held up a hand, signaling for silence. I leaned toward my phone again. The line to the ICU was still open. That steady, rhythmic beep was still there. Beep, beep. Sarah? I asked, my voice ringing with clarity. Are you still there? I'm here, Ava, her voice replied, a small island of clinical calm in our storm. Sarah, in your professional medical opinion, right at this moment, is my father's cognitive state sufficient for him to understand a simple question and provide a direct answer? There was no hesitation. Yes, she said firmly. His chart shows he's on a minimal dose of pain medication. He is conscious, his pupils are reactive, and he has correctly identified me by name and stated the correct day of the week. He meets all the criteria for basic cognitive awareness. It was a clinical, dispassionate, and utterly devastating checkmate. Janelle crumpled back into her chair as if her strings had been cut. Mr. Davies looked up from his tablet. He looked at Janelle's ashen face, at Victor's sputtering rage, and then at me. His face was grim. He was a man of the rules, and the rules were now, suddenly, crystal clear. Based on the verbal directive from the shareholder, corroborated by the medical authority present, he announced to the room, and supported by the pre-existing documentation of intent, it is my legal opinion that a valid intent signal, as described in Article 4, Section 3B, has been established. He took a deep breath. The proxy for Owen Mercer's shares is temporarily assigned to Ava Mercer. He looked at Victor. Mr. Chairman, any vote taken today must be paused until the company's official share register can be updated to reflect this change in voting power. The war wasn't over, but the balance of power had just irrevocably shifted. I reached out and ended the call, cutting off the sound of the beeping heart monitor. The sudden silence that fell was Janelle's. It was the sound of her world collapsing. The pause in voting was a void, a vacuum of power. Janelle and Victor were reeling, thrown off balance by a ghost's voice on a telephone. They expected me to savor the victory, to gloat. They expected an emotional response. I gave them a spreadsheet. Mr. Davies, while you update the share register, I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. The board still has a fiduciary duty to address operational matters. The Fleet North merger, as proposed, is predicated on the valuation of our assets at the Golden Spur port. I nodded toward the door. As if on cue, it opened, and Maya Knoll, our CFO, walked in. She carried a tablet, and her expression was one of absolute neutrality. She was here to present numbers, not opinions. I've asked our CFO, Ms. Knoll, to join us to clarify some financial discrepancies my office uncovered this weekend, I announced. Victor started to object, but Marcus Thorne, the cautious banker, held up a hand. Let's hear it. If shareholder value is at risk, we need to know. I gave Maya the floor. She didn't look at Janelle or Victor. She addressed the screen at the end of the room as it lit up with a complex financial statement. Good morning, she began, her voice crisp. I draw your attention to the expense ledgers for Dock 6 at the Golden Spur facility. For the past 11 consecutive quarters, you will note a recurring line item for emergency critical maintenance. She highlighted the row. The numbers were staggering, a 7-figure sum, repeating every 3 months like clockwork. 11 consecutive emergencies? Elena Rios, the tech entrepreneur, asked, her skepticism evident. That isn't an emergency. That's a budget item. Who is the contractor performing this critical work? Maya advanced to the next slide. It displayed a logo for a company called Blue Ridge Ports. Beneath it were the corporate details, pulled from public records. Blue Ridge Ports was incorporated 38 months ago in Delaware, Maya stated, her voice flat. It lists a mailing address that is a P.O. box in Wilmington. It has 3 registered employees. She paused, letting the absurdity of a 3-person company handling millions in critical infrastructure repair sink in. And the director of this company? Marcus asked, leaning forward. Maya's finger tapped her tablet. A name and a photograph appeared on the screen. The photograph was from a society gala last year. In it, Janelle was laughing, her arm linked with a smiling young woman. The registered director of Blue Ridge Ports is a Ms. Chloe Webb. Maya's voice remained perfectly level. Who is also, according to HFS Human Resources records, Janelle Mercer's personal assistant. Janelle made a choking sound. Victor Hale's face had gone from flushed red to a pasty, unhealthy gray. He was staring at Maya as if she were a hangman. That's circumstantial, he stammered. Then let's follow the money, I said. Taking over, I clicked the remote in my hand, and a new slide appeared on the screen. It was a flowchart, a simple, brutal map of financial transactions. Arrows connected boxes, illustrating a clear path. The money flows from HFS to Blue Ridge Ports for services never rendered, I explained, tracing the first arrow with a laser pointer. From Blue Ridge, the funds are then transferred, minus a small commission for Ms. Webb, into an investment fund called Halberd 9. I aimed the laser pointer at the next box in the chain. Halberd 9 is a private equity fund. It has a number of advisors on its board. They are compensated for their expertise. I clicked again. A list of names appeared. Oddly enough, one of its senior advisors, who receives a substantial annual honorarium, is our own acting chairman, Victor Hale. The silence was now accusatory. Marcus and Elena were staring at Victor, their expressions hardening from suspicion to outright condemnation. From Halberd 9, I continued, my voice dropping. The money makes its final move. The laser pointer traced the last arrow. It's funneled into a private corporate account. The name of the final box appeared in large, bold letters. JM Ventures, LLC. I turned off the laser pointer and looked directly at my stepmother. JM, as in, perhaps, Janelle Mercer? She finally found her voice. It was a thin, reedy thing, a pale imitation of her usual commanding tone. She attempted a laugh, but it came out as a strangled bark. That's absurd. It's a coincidence. There are thousands of companies with those initials. There are, I agreed smoothly, but not all of them are about to be used as the primary vehicle to acquire liquidated assets from the Fleet North merger, are they? Victor slammed his hand on the table. This is a character assassination, a desperate attempt to derail a profitable merger by a disgruntled employee, he roared. You have no proof of any of this. It's conjecture, a fantasy. Proof? I asked softly. I looked down at my laptop, then back up at him. You're right, a flowchart isn't proof. I tapped a key. The screen changed one last time. It now showed a single document, an email, the anonymous email I had received on Friday night. Check Doc 6 contract, designation J6. This message led my team to search the secure server archives this weekend. I said, we were looking for any addendum related to the Blue Ridge contract. We found it. I maximized the document attached to the email. It was a PDF, a 1-page contract addendum labeled J6. It authorized the emergency payment structure and indemnified the contractor from performance audits. It was a license to steal. And at the bottom of the page, there were 2 digital signature blocks, one for Chloe Webb, and one for Victor Hale. "This is the J6 addendum," I said. "And this?" I zoomed in on Victor's signature. "Is your digital signature, Victor. But the most interesting part isn't the signature itself. It's the metadata. It's the timestamp." The timestamp details appeared in a pop-up box next to the signature. Date, July 15th. Time, 2:32 p.m. July 15th, at 2:32 p.m., I read aloud. According to the official minutes, at that exact time, the HFS Board of Directors was in the middle of a quarterly performance review meeting. You, Victor, were physically present in this very room. You approved a multi-million-dollar fraudulent contract addendum while you were simultaneously supposed to be exercising your fiduciary duty to the rest of the board. That isn't a coincidence. It's a crime. That was it, the final nail. "I demand an immediate, full-scale internal investigation," Elena Rios said, her voice sharp and decisive. She looked at Marcus, who nodded in grim agreement. "Lock down all relevant accounts and servers, now." "This is a diversion," Victor yelled, his composure completely gone. "She's trying to distract you from the merger vote." He was still trying to play a game that had ended 10 minutes ago. I stood up. I now had my father's authority, his 20% stake, behind my every word. I was no longer just the VP of operations. I was the voice of the founder. "It's not a diversion. Victor, it's a purge." I looked at the corporate security chief, who had been standing discreetly by the door since Maya's arrival. A prearranged signal. "Mr. Thompson, pursuant to HFS Corporate Risk Management Policy, Article 9, Section 4, which covers credible allegations of financial malfeasance, I am ordering the immediate suspension of all network and system access for Chairman Victor Hale and Board Member Janelle Mercer, pending the results of the investigation demanded by the board." The security chief nodded once. "Understood. Ms. Mercer," he spoke quietly into his wrist. "Execute Protocol 9-4. Subjects, Hale, Victor, Mercer, Janelle, effective immediately." Victor and Janelle stared at me, their faces masks of disbelief and impotent fury. Their keycards were now useless pieces of plastic. Their corporate accounts were frozen. Their emails were locked. They were ghosts in their own machine. I had not only exposed them, I had unplugged them. Locking Victor and Janelle out of the system was a defensive move. What I did next was the offensive. It was time to take the battle out of the boardroom and into the heart of the company itself. This wasn't just about fraud anymore. It was about the culture Janelle and Victor had poisoned. A culture of fear, secrecy, and contempt for the people who actually did the work. My eyes met those of the security chief, Thompson, and I gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod. He touched his earpiece again. Victor and Janelle, still trapped in their chairs by shock and humiliation, didn't notice, but Marcus and Elena did. They saw the shift, the silent command. In the corner of the boardroom, a small, discreet camera, normally used for teleconferencing with our international offices, blinked from standby green to active red. A low hum resonated through the room as the integrated broadcasting system came online. "What are you doing?" Victor demanded, his voice a low growl. "My job," I replied, turning my body slightly to better face the now live camera. "I'm communicating with our company's most important stakeholders, our employees and our investors." On the main screen, the damning flowchart of their money laundering scheme vanished. In its place, the HFS Live logo appeared, followed by a view of the boardroom itself, across the company, on thousands of computer screens in dispatch offices, on tablets on warehouse floors, and on the monitors of shareholders tuning in. Our tense faces suddenly materialized. An alert had just gone out to every HFS employee. Mandatory all-hands town hall. Live now. Victor and Janelle stared at the screen, at their own trapped images being broadcast live, and the full horror of the situation dawned on them. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. They were the main attraction in a corporate execution, and the whole world, their whole world, was watching. I clicked the remote, The first slide appeared over my shoulder. The words stark and white against a black background. Transparency or obscenity? "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice now amplified not just in the room, but across the entire HFS network. My heart was a hammering drum against my ribs, a frantic, wild rhythm beneath my calm exterior. The red light of the camera was a burning eye, a point of no return. For 5 years, a shadow has been growing over this company. A culture of backroom deals and intimidation has begun to replace the values my father, Owen Mercer, built this company on. Today, we bring it into the light. I looked at Janelle. Her face was a mask of frozen fury. "Some members of this board would have you believe that I am emotionally unstable, that stress has made me unfit for my duties." I took a deep breath. "I want you all to hear for yourselves what happened in the ICU corridor at St. Ober's Hospital on Friday night." I pressed the play button. The audio file, scrubbed of the hospital's name but otherwise untouched, filled the speakers. First, the chilling, antiseptic silence of the hospital hallway. Then, Janelle's voice, a venomous, sibilant whisper. "The voting shares will be mine." My own voice, tight and strained. "Give it back, Janelle." Then her final words, dripping with contempt. "You don't deserve the Mercer name." Then came the sound, the sickening, wet thud of her fist connecting with my cheek, followed immediately by the louder, metallic rattle of the vending machine as I slammed into it. A collective gasp was audible from the speakers in the boardroom, the real-time reaction of our listening audience. And then, the ghost's voice. My father's shredded whisper, broadcast across his entire company. "Janelle, hit my daughter." On a secondary screen, I projected a live, moderated feed of the company's internal chat channel. It exploded. A waterfall of text scrolled past at an impossible speed. "OMG, did anyone else hear that? They are playing it live in the warehouse. Everyone just stopped working." That was Owen's voice. That was Mr. Mercer. "Unbelievable. This is assault. The proof is right there." The employees were the jury, and they had reached a verdict in seconds. I stopped the audio file and faced the camera again, my expression grim. This behavior is not leadership. This is a disgrace, and it is the rotten fruit of the financial corruption we have also uncovered. I gestured to the board. Therefore, I am announcing 3 immediate actions. First, as the acting proxy for our founder's shares, I am officially tabling the motion to merge with Fleet North Logistics. That deal is dead. I paused, letting that sink in. Second, the board has authorized a full, independent investigation into the financial activities of Victor Hale and Janelle Mercer, to be conducted by the outside law firm of Sterling and Crow. They will have full, unrestricted access to all company records. And third, I trailed off, and nodded to Maya. She stood up, her face set like stone. The Fleet North merger, as structured, along with the fraudulent contracts at Dock 6, placed the company at extreme legal and financial risk, Maya said, her voice carrying the unassailable weight of hard numbers. Our risk analysis, completed this morning, shows that had this merger proceeded, the subsequent asset stripping and contract defaults would have likely triggered a catastrophic stock devaluation. Specifically, for our employees who are part of the HFS Employee Stock Ownership Plan, the ESOP, our models predicted a potential loss of up to 30% of your retirement savings. If the audio of the assault was the spark, this was the gasoline. The internal chat became a raging fire. The issue was no longer about a distant boardroom battle. It was about their families, their futures, their life's work. Victor could take no more. He shot up from his chair, his face purple with rage. He lunged for the sleek, silver microphone in the center of the table, intending to shout his defense, to sow doubt, to seize control. "This is a lie! A corporate coup!" he bellowed. He never got the chance. The moment his fingers touched the microphone, the small green light on its base went dark. In the control room, 2 floors down, a technician, following my explicit instructions, had cut his audio feed. Victor Hale, the acting chairman of the board, was screaming into a dead mic, his words swallowed by the soundproof glass of the boardroom. A silent, raging fish in a bowl. Thompson, the security chief, took a single, deliberate step toward him. Victor froze, looked from the dead microphone to the impassive guard, and sank back into his chair, utterly defeated. He had been rendered powerless. All eyes then turned to Janelle. Her fight was gone. Her face was hollow, her eyes empty. She saw no way out. Slowly, mechanically. She pushed her chair back, the sound scraping loudly in the tense room. She was going to walk out. She was going to flee the public execution. She stood up and turned her back on the table, on the camera, on the wreckage of her ambitions. She took one step toward the door. "You should stay, Janelle," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the entire network. She stopped, her back still to me. "The best part is yet to come." Janelle stood frozen, her back to the boardroom table, caught in the spotlight of my final words. The silence in the room was absolute, a holding of breath that stretched across the entire company network. The live chat feed, still visible on the secondary monitor, had gone still. 10,000 employees were waiting for the best part. Slowly, deliberately, I raised my left hand. On my third finger was a simple, wide silver band, unadorned and elegant. It wasn't flashy. It was a piece of quiet history, of substance. "This ring was my mother's," I said, my voice soft but clear, picked up perfectly by the broadcast microphone. I held my hand steady for the camera to see. She was a journalist. She taught me that the truth is in the details, and that memory can be a fragile thing. When she passed, she left this for me. It's not just jewelry, for my work. I had it fitted with a high-fidelity micro-recorder. It's voice-activated. I use it to record my verbal notes after site visits and meetings. It's a tool for memory, compliant with all corporate policies on recording devices, a tool for memory, not for war. I paused, letting my gaze drift from the camera to Janelle's rigid back, then to Victor's stunned face. Until today. 2 weeks ago, before my father's surgery was even scheduled, Janelle asked to meet with me. She chose a neutral location, the 4th level of the public parking garage downtown. As I spoke, the scene materialized in my mind, vivid and cold, the smell of concrete dust and old exhaust fumes, the low, oppressive ceiling and the flickering fluorescent lights that cast long, distorted shadows. I had been walking to my car when her black SUV had pulled up, blocking my path. She got out, all smiles and sharp angles. "She wanted to talk about the future," I continued, my voice a low, narrative thrum. "She was concerned about a smooth transition of power should anything happen to my father on the operating table. She said the board, and Victor specifically, needed reassurance. In the memory, her words were like ice chips. Be smart, Ava. Your father is an old man. This surgery, it's a risk. The company needs a steady hand, not a sentimental one. Sign a temporary proxy, assigning his shares to the board to be voted by the chairman. Do it before the surgery. As a sign of good faith, it will ensure you still have a place here when the dust settles." She wasn't asking for my cooperation, I told the boardroom, and the thousands of people watching. She was demanding my surrender. She was telling me to sign away my father's legacy before he was even under anesthesia, in exchange for the privilege of keeping my own job. She was trying to coerce the heir to the company's largest shareholding block. I looked at Mr. Davies, our general counsel. Another direct violation of Article 7. Section 5, wouldn't you agree? Mr. Davies? An act of coercion and intimidation regarding shareholding rights. Davies simply nodded, his face grim. He knew exactly what was coming. "Now," I said, tapping a key on my laptop, "you can all hear it for yourselves." I played the file from the ring. The audio was crystal clear, the acoustics of the parking garage creating a slight, chilling echo. Janelle's voice, stripped of its boardroom polish, was sharp, impatient, and menacing. "Janelle, audio, A steady hand, not a sentimental one. Sign a temporary proxy. Ava. Audio. I would never do that. It's his decision. Janelle. Audio. Don't be a fool. Victor is already on board. This is your only way to guarantee your future here. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's a simple business decision. Cooperate, and you stay VP. Fight this, and you'll be managing a loading dock in another state by Christmas. The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. It wasn't just corporate maneuvering, it was blackmail. I stopped the recording. That was strike two, I said softly. But this little conspiracy wasn't just about intimidation, it was about theft. The J6 contract needed Victor's signature to start the flow of money, but he was nervous. He needed to be sure he had the board votes to approve the larger Fleet North merger that would be his ultimate payday. I pulled up another file on my screen. This one was different. It was a voice analysis waveform next to a contact labeled Unknown, Burner. The night after Janelle threatened me in the garage, I received a voicemail. It was from a disposable number. The message was meant to self-delete after being played, but our IT security team's archival system caught it first. I looked at Victor. His face, which had been pale, was now slick with sweat. The message was short, a final instruction to someone he thought was a co-conspirator. Over the weekend, I had our security forensics team run a voice print analysis. The results are conclusive. The voice belongs to Victor Hale. I pressed play. A man's voice, distorted slightly by the phone line but dripping with arrogance, filled the room. It was unmistakably Victor. Victor, audio. It's done. J6 is signed. Tell your girl the money will flow as soon as the wire clears. Just make sure Ava is handled. No last-minute heroics from Daddy's little girl. I stopped the recording. A 45-second window, I said to the silent room. In that time, we have a direct threat of termination from one board member and a direct admission of conspiracy to defraud the company from another. I looked at the general counsel. Mr. Davies, my legal team has verified the metadata on both of these recordings. They are time-stamped, unedited, and legally obtained under the circumstances. Davies nodded again, his face like granite. The spell of silence was broken by Elena Rios. She stood up, her movements sharp and precise. She wasn't looking at me, or at Janelle or Victor. She was addressing Marcus Thorne and Mr. Davies. This is no longer a matter for an internal investigation to handle, she said, her voice ringing with cold fury. This is a matter for the authorities. I move for an immediate emergency vote. Motion 1. To suspend Victor Hale from his duties as acting chairman and a member of this board, effective immediately. Motion 2. To strip Janelle Mercer of her board seat and all associated privileges, effective immediately. All in favor? Aye, Marcus Thorne said instantly, his voice a low rumble of disgust. He stood up to join her. As the proxy for Owen Mercer, I vote aye, I said, standing as well. 3 of the 5 voting members were now standing. It was a majority. It was over. Thompson, the security chief, stepped forward. He looked not at Victor, but at Janelle. Ma'am, he said, his voice polite but unyielding. We'll need you to remain here to provide a statement. Panic finally broke through Janelle's shock. Her hand darted to her purse, fumbling for her phone. She was going to call her lawyer, her allies, anyone. She pulled the phone out, her thumb swiping desperately at the screen. Nothing. A small, no-service icon sat at the top of the screen. She looked up, her eyes wild with confusion. The North Dock boardroom is a secure facility, I explained calmly to the room, and to the camera. As per company security policy for sensitive meetings, all external cellular and Wi-Fi signals are disabled upon the activation of a live broadcast. No calls get in, no calls get out. She was trapped. They both were. Caged in the glass box they thought was their throne room, with the whole company as their witness. I took a deep breath, the first one that felt full and clean all morning. I turned and looked directly into the burning red light of the camera. I was no longer speaking to the board, or to Janelle, or to Victor. I was speaking to the thousands of people who depended on HFS, to the drivers, the mechanics, the dispatchers, the accountants, to the company that was my family. Halcyon Freight and Supply is not a private bank account for the greedy, I said, my voice resonating with a strength I didn't know I possessed. It is not a playground for bullies. HFS is not a place for violence, and it is not a place for money laundering. Effective today, we are going back to the business of keeping our promises, to our clients, and to each other. The camera's red light was an unblinking eye, a silent witness to the final, heavy moments of the execution. The frantic energy of the live broadcast had dissipated, replaced by a thick, solemn quiet. The air in the North Dock boardroom was still and cold. It was the silence of a verdict delivered, a silence that precedes the carrying out of a sentence. Mr. Davies, the general counsel, was the first to speak. He adjusted the microphone before him, not for broadcast, but for the formal record. His voice was devoid of emotion, a dry recitation of law that, in this context, felt more damning than any accusation. For the official minutes, he began, his gaze fixed on the center of the table. I am formally attesting that the criteria for intent signal under Article 4, Section 3B have been met. The combination of a prepared legal document, a direct verbal instruction from the shareholder, and the corroborating testimony of the attending medical professional establishes a legal and binding transfer of temporary voting authority for the shares of Owen Mercer to Ava Mercer. This is effective immediately. Each word was a nail being hammered into a coffin. Victor Hale stared at his hands. Janelle seemed to have shrunk in her chair, a hollowed-out version of the imperious woman who had swept into the room an hour before. Elena Rios, still standing, did not sit. Her eyes were like chips of flint. The motions have been put forward, she said, her voice cutting through the stillness. We will now vote, first, on the immediate suspension of Victor Hale from his position as acting chairman and from all board duties, pending the outcome of a criminal investigation. She looked at Marcus Thorne. The old banker, a man who lived and breathed procedure, did not hesitate. He spoke the word as if it were a weight on his tongue. Aye. Lena then looked at me. My own vote was a foregone conclusion, but it had to be spoken, to be entered into the record. Aye, I said, my voice steady. 3 votes of 5 were now cast, Elena, Marcus, and me. Davies looked to Victor, the subject of the motion. He remained silent, his head bowed, a tacit abstention born of total defeat. Janelle was a non-entity, staring into space. The motion carries, Davies announced, his voice flat. 3 in favor. Victor Hale is suspended. The fall of the gavel was silent, but everyone in the room felt its impact. Elena's gaze, merciless and sharp, moved to Janelle. Second, she said, the word like a crack of ice. On the motion to terminate Janelle Mercer from the board of directors for gross misconduct, coercion, and actions detrimental to the company and its shareholders, as per Article 7, Section 5. Aye, Marcus said again, his voice even deeper this time, filled with a cold disgust. Aye, I said, the word leaving my lips with a feeling of profound, grim finality. Aye, Elena stated, casting her own vote. 3 votes. But this motion felt different. It was not a suspension. It was a termination, an erasure. Davies clarified the procedure for the record. As the subject of the motion, Ms. Mercer is ineligible to vote. Of the 4 remaining eligible voters, we have 3 votes in favor. He paused, and for a moment, the room held its breath. Then, from the end of the table, a 4th voice spoke, a low and broken thing. It was Victor. He didn't look up. He said the word to the polished surface of the table, a final, pathetic act of self-preservation, severing his ties to his co-conspirator in the hopes of lessening his own damnation. The motion carries, Davies said. 4 in favor. Janelle Mercer is removed from the board of directors of Halcyon Freight and Supply, effective immediately. The sentence was passed. Now, it would be carried out. Maya Knoll, who had been standing silently by the wall, stepped forward. She placed a thin leather folio in front of me. Inside were 3 documents, prepared over a sleepless weekend. I opened the folio with a heavy black fountain pen, my father's pen, which I had taken from his office that morning. I began to sign. My signature, clear and unwavering, authorized the first order, a full, unrestricted forensic audit of the past 5 years of HFS financials, to be conducted by Sterling and Crow. I pushed the signed paper across to Davies. The second signature froze all existing and pending contracts with Blue Ridge Ports and the Halberd 9 Investment Fund. All payments were to be suspended. All assets were to be locked down. I slid it over. The final signature authorized a company-wide communication. While I signed, Maya was already typing. On thousands of screens, a new message appeared, overriding the live broadcast feed. Company-wide notification. The Board of Directors has voted to halt all proceedings related to the Fleet North merger. A full review of shareholder protections is underway. The company has initiated an independent investigation into financial misconduct and affirms its commitment to full whistleblower protection. The message was a promise. A new era was beginning. It was then that Janelle finally broke. A sound, a raw, guttural sob, tore from her throat. But there were no tears of remorse. Her face was contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Her breakdown was not that of a guilty conscience, but of a defeated monarch. She had lost her kingdom. She looked at me, her eyes burning with a hateful fire. She leaned forward, and though her voice was a ragged whisper, it carried the weight of a curse. "You will regret this, you little bitch," she hissed. Before I could respond, the main doors to the boardroom swung open. 2 figures, a man and a woman, entered. They did not wear the HFS security uniform. They wore dark, conservative suits that failed to conceal their athletic builds and the grim set of their jaws. They moved with a quiet, purposeful authority that made even the wealth and power in the room seem insignificant. The man held up a badge. "Graybridge Police Department, Financial Crimes Unit," he said, his voice calm and professional. He handed a thick envelope to a stunned Mr. Davies. "We have a subpoena for all records, communications, and minutes related to Blue Ridge Ports, Halberd 9, and the Fleet North merger proposal. We also have warrants for the immediate questioning of Mr. Victor Hale and Ms. Janelle Mercer." Victor Hale finally looked up. He saw the detectives, the warrant, the end of the line. The fight drained out of him, leaving behind the empty husk of a man. He bowed his head and said nothing. His silence was a confession. As the detectives approached the table, a vibration in my pocket pulled me from the scene. I looked down at my phone, a text message. It was from Sarah, the nurse in the ICU. "He's more lucid now. Asking for you? Says he wants to try a video call." The words hit me with more force than Janelle's fist. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. The fight, the votes, the police, it all faded into the background. That was the victory. That was the only thing that had ever truly mattered. I stood up straight, my back to the unfolding drama of Janelle's quiet, furious weeping, and Victor's silent collapse. I faced the camera one last time, the small red light that had been my weapon and my witness. My face was composed, the shadow of the bruise on my cheek a testament to the battle that had just been won. I spoke to the thousands of people watching, my voice clear and final. "The meeting is adjourned." As the technician cut the feed, a new sound began to filter through the broadcast speakers before they went silent. It was faint at first, then it grew. It was the sound of applause, not the thunderous roar of a stadium, but the scattered, heartfelt clapping from warehouse floors, from dispatch offices, from cubicles and truck cabs across the country, a quiet, sustained ovation, a sound of liberation. I stepped away from the table, away from the wreckage of 2 careers and the silent, stunned faces of the remaining board members. The detectives were speaking in low, professional tones to a now compliant Mr. Davies. Janelle was a statue of ice. Victor was a ghost. None of them mattered anymore. My world had compressed to the small, vibrating phone in my hand. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling glass wall that overlooked the container yard. Turning my back on the room, I needed this one moment to be mine alone. My thumb, which had been so steady all morning, trembled slightly as I answered the incoming video call. The screen flickered to life, and there he was. My father's face filled the small frame. It was a sight that both broke my heart and stitched it back together. He was pale. The skin around his eyes bruised a deep, shadowy purple from the surgery. A nasal cannula delivered oxygen, and the stubble on his cheeks was gray and uneven. He looked tired. He looked fragile, but he was awake. His eyes, though heavy-lidded, were clear. And as he looked at me, a smile, weak but unmistakable, touched his lips. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me. His gaze drifted to the side of my face, to the shadow of the bruise that even my best makeup couldn't fully conceal. His weak smile faded, replaced by a flicker of the old protective fire I knew so well. Then, his voice came through the speaker, no longer a shredded whisper, but a quiet, raspy version of his own. "I heard it all, Ava," he said. "The live stream. The nurse had it on her tablet for me. I heard everything." Tears I hadn't realized I was holding back welled in my eyes, hot and sharp. I blinked them away, refusing to let them fall. "I'm sorry you had to hear it like that," I whispered, my own voice thick with emotion. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate movement. "Don't be. I needed to." A long pause settled between us, a silence filled not with tension, but with a deep, unspoken understanding that transcended the miles and the fiber optic cable connecting us. "You did what you had to do." "I don't need revenge, Dad," I said, the words coming from a place deep inside me, a truth I had only just realized myself. I just needed the truth to come out, for them and for everyone. He nodded again, a look of profound pride in his tired eyes. "HFS belongs to decent people," he rasped, his voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. "You just reminded them of that." I reached up on my screen and ended the internal broadcast feed. The little red light on the camera in the corner of the room blinked off. The show was over. I then walked through a side door onto the narrow outdoor balcony that wrapped around the top floor, leaving the quiet hum of the boardroom's aftermath behind me. The Gray Bridge air was cool and damp. A fine, misty rain was falling. Not a downpour, but a gentle cleansing that beaded on the glass and settled on my skin. Below me, the container yard was a vast, orderly landscape of steel boxes in red, blue, and green. The trucks moved with a disciplined grace. The cranes operated with a silent, powerful rhythm. It was the company's heartbeat, steady and strong, utterly indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded in the glass box above. It was real. It would endure. The door opened behind me. It was Thompson, the security chief. He didn't speak. He just held out a sealed instant ice pack. I took it from him with a grateful nod. I cracked the inner pouch, and the pack instantly turned bitingly cold. I pressed it to my cheek. The sharp, icy sensation was a shock. But as I held it there, the hot, throbbing ache of the bruise began to subside, the burning fire of Friday night finally giving way to a numb, manageable coolness. Through the glass, I watched the two detectives escort Janelle from the room. She walked between them, her head held high in a last, defiant act of pride. But it was a hollow gesture. As she passed a window, the cold, fluorescent light of the hallway raked across her face, illuminating its stark pallor. She looked not evil, not monstrous, but simply small, diminished. No one said a word as she was led away. Her power had been absolute, but her exit was in silence. I walked back inside. Maya had already packed her things, but she waited for me by the table. In front of my seat was a single, fresh sheet of paper, It was the official HFS form for the temporary transfer of proxy. Mr. Davies had printed a new one. All the legal jargon was there, but at the bottom, there was a single, empty line. I picked up my father's heavy black fountain pen, the pen he had used to sign the first incorporation papers for the company 30 years ago. I uncapped it. The nib touched the paper. My hand did not shake. I signed my name, Ava Mercer. In a steady, confident script, I was no longer just the heir. I was the steward. My phone screen, still in my hand, went dark as the video call timed out. The connection was severed. The hospital room, the tired but proud face of my father, was gone. I was alone in the quiet boardroom, with the weight of it all settling onto my shoulders. It was a heavy weight, but it was a good one. It felt like home. I looked at the signed document, at the proof of what had been lost and what had been won, and I whispered the words into the silence of the room for an audience of one. "Dad," I said softly, "it's done." I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving the pen on the table. As I pulled the heavy glass door closed, it swung shut with a quiet, definitive click. For a fraction of a second, before the frosted glass obscured the view, the polished surface caught my reflection. It showed a woman, her face tired but resolute. It showed the dark, fading shadow of a bruise on her cheek. And superimposed over it all, reflected from the glass wall opposite, was the bright, unwavering logo of Halcyon Freight and Supply. Thank you for listening to this story. I'm curious, where in the world are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. And feel free to share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. For extra support, hit that hype button to help this story reach more listeners.